Tonight, Diana's royal funeral. The public granted a final farewell to their beloved princess. Good evening. A public funeral service will be held for Diana at Westminster Abbey this Saturday. The ceremony will be followed by a private burial at her family's estate. We cross now to 7 News reporter Stan Grant in London. And Stan, there's been a lot of speculation, I understand, about the funeral. People relieved that they'll be given the chance to pay their final respects to Diana?
Well, yes, Chris, they certainly are. As we've seen over the past 30-odd hours here, there's been an enormous outpouring of grief. This has really touched the hearts of so many people, not just here, but all over the world. And the people of London especially wanted to say their final farewell. They were calling for a state funeral. They're calling this, in fact, a royal funeral, but it is going to be a funeral with all the trappings held at Westminster Abbey, and it'll cap what has been a week of mourning, as Neil Warren reports.
Westminster Abbey, the confirmed venue, Saturday, the last chance for mourners to pay their respects to the people's princess. From Buckingham Palace, the promise of a unique funeral for a unique person. But it won't be a full state occasion, it'll be what's termed a royal funeral, similar to that held for Lord Mountbatten.
But this doesn't mean anything about how the nation views it, probably in terms of coming to terms with what the Spencer family require and what the nation feels is absolutely right in this case. And remember, this would have been decided in very close consultation with the representative of the country, the Prime Minister, with the family and with the palace.
It should satisfy the overwhelming demand from a grieving public for a fitting farewell. The royal family will undertake a period of mourning this week, flags flying at half-mast. Diana's coffin has already been moved to a chapel at St James Palace, where Saturday's funeral procession will begin. She'll be laid to rest at the Spencer family home in Northamptonshire. The end of the journey from Paris. Diana's body retrieved by Prince Charles and her two sisters. They were greeted by French President Jacques Chirac. A French Guard of Honour led to the aircraft, which was to fly the princess back to British soil. Tony Blair was there to meet it. This, the start of Britain coming to grips with reality.
Stan, how difficult has it been to decide the funeral arrangements?
Oh, I suppose, Chris, it's happened fairly quickly. I mean, let's be realistic here. It hasn't been 48 hours since that tragic car accident that claimed the princess's life. Since then, we've seen Prince Charles go to Paris and retrieve the body, bring Princess Diana back. She was then taken to a private morgue that has since been transferred to St James's Palace, which is the official royal court here. And that's been an extraordinary scene. There have been people just lining around the block, lining up to pay their respects, to sign the condolences books. And that's people from all over the world. So I suppose things have happened fairly quickly, fairly smoothly. The other thing to point out fairly quickly here, Chris, is that this has almost been a welcoming back into the royal fold, albeit posthumously, for Princess Diana. She lost the title Her Royal Highness when she divorced Prince Charles. But now, as we saw yesterday, the coffin was draped in the royal standard, the royal colours, and now, of course, we're going to have this royal funeral. So certainly, I suppose, a recognition that, at least in death, she plays such an enormous role in the life of the royal family.
And Stan, is there any more news about the Princes William and Harry? Are they expected to attend the funeral?
I'd imagine they would be, Chris. At this stage, we haven't heard a lot. They've been shielded away from the glare of publicity, as you might expect. I mean, you can only try to imagine the enormity of the grief they must be going through. I mean, they're young. They're 15 and 13. They've had to live through so much, the traumatic breakup of their parents' marriage, and now losing their mother at such a young and impressionable age themselves. And Prince Charles, of course, after bringing back Princess Diana's body, flew back to Scotland to be with the boys at Balmoral, and he's been soothing them, helping them to overcome their grief. But no doubt they'll make their way to London over the next day or two.
And just quickly, Stan, Dodi Al Fayed's family, we believe, is going to take legal action against the photographers involved in the crash.
They are. In fact, the legal action was flagged before the crash. There was a lot of speculation that there was going to be legal action because of the enormous pressure that the media was placing Dodi Fayed and also Princess Diana under. now, of course, with the media being blamed, or at least the French paparazzi being blamed to some degree for causing this crash in pursuit of Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed, that now they are going to go ahead with that legal action and take them to court. Remember, of course, there is also a criminal investigation into this. Some photographers have been arrested, and there may be criminal charges pending from that. We'll have to wait and see the outcome of the investigation.
All right, Stan, thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
The 7 Network will cross live to London for Princess Diana's funeral at Westminster Abbey on Saturday night. Already across Britain, mourners have filled churches to pray for Diana. They've also gathered outside Buckingham Palace, as we just saw, and her former home, Kensington Palace, with flowers and messages of sympathy. Again, here's Neil Warren with our report.
Across the country, churches have been packed. Special services, prayers of remembrance.
May the power and presence of Christ bring to them and to us courage and strength for the days to come.
None more significant than here at St Paul's Cathedral, where Diana was married to Charles 16 years ago. But Kensington Palace has been the focus of the nation's grief. Flowers piled as high as they could go, people from all over Britain. They'll be here for days with their gifts and tears. It's an incredible sight. Hundreds of mourners outside Diana's home, the numbers swelling overnight. A crowd still finding it hard to accept that this has happened. To them, the Princess of the People is irreplaceable.
I love Diana so much. Everybody loves Diana.
Earlier, they wept in disbelief. Buckingham Palace, another gathering place to unload their grief.
She's someone that every young woman probably wanted to be.
There were dozens of Australians.
I guess it's the same as when JFK or those sort of famous people pass away. You always remember where you are and what you were doing.
Harrods was closed. There were flowers and messages of condolence there too, and the flags were at half-mast.
The world has lost a princess who is quite simply irreplaceable. Mr. Al Fayed has lost a much-loved eldest son.
Radio stations shut down out of respect. Newsreaders could barely contain their emotions.
They loved her. She was the people's princess.
But it's the press which is being blamed for hounding Diana to her death. And there's anger on the streets.
You've lost a lovely person for nothing. You're horrible.
And this from one of the princess's best friends, who holidayed with Diana in Greece only 10 days ago.
She was relaxed and very happy and seemed to have found a sort of peace in her life. And it's just a pity that the paparazzi could not give her the space that she so famously asked for.
British celebrities have begun their tributes.
Everybody was amazed to see this butterfly emerge from this chrysalis, this extraordinarily beautiful woman.
But it was Diana's common touch that won over so many hearts. The royals would prefer a more private farewell. They may have to reconsider after this overwhelming outpouring of grief. In London, Neil Warren, 7 Nightly News.
Today, a funeral for Diana's boyfriend, Dodi Al Fayed, laid to rest just outside London. As Stan mentioned earlier, Dodi's grieving father, Mohammed Al Fayed, is now vowing to pursue the paparazzi in the courts, just like they pursued his son.
It was a solemn, low-key event, a ceremony at Regent's Park Mosque in London, where Dodi's father, Mohammed, wept quietly beside the coffin. Under Muslim custom, the dead are buried as soon as possible. After the funeral, his body was taken to Brookwood Cemetery near London. Dodi may have been better known in Hollywood than England, producing Chariots of Fire, The World According to Garp, and Hook.
You're beautiful.
But his playboy reputation wasn't publicised until his romantic link with Diana.
Par quelques journalistes à moto.
The family's lawyer says Mohammed Al Fayed had started proceedings to stop press intrusion after Dodi and Diana were photographed holidaying off the French coast.
Mr. Al Fayed is quite sure that but for the unwelcome attentions of these people, who I suppose we shall have to call photographers, this tragedy would never have happened.
The civil action is expected to begin as soon as a judicial inquiry starts into the accident. Emma Rossi, 7 Nightly News.
The lone survivor of the crash, 29-year-old security guard Trevor Rees-Jones, remains in a Paris hospital tonight, his family maintaining a bedside vigil. His account of just what happened is critical to police investigations, but today at least, the blame was clearly directed at the paparazzi.
This is what politicians and celebrities are up against trying to get around Paris. In the choked streets, the motorbike armed with a photographer is impossible to escape. And this in a country with some of the world's toughest privacy laws. Since Saturday night's horrific crash, police have held in custody 7 members of the paparazzi, believed to have been chasing Dodi-fired 6-litre Mercedes at speeds of up to 180 kilometres per hour. At the very least, they could be charged with failing to assist at the scene of an accident. A witness we spoke to saw one taking photos of Diana still trapped inside the wrecked vehicle.
The irony and the tragedy and the loss and all of it together, and one says, you know, why?
French magazines are some of the biggest payers. Do they fund this dangerous game? The bosses say no.
It's too bad. I feel sorry they happened here, but it could have happened anywhere, the kind of car chase.
If anyone is charged, they won't have trouble making bail. One good photo of Diana and Dodi could fetch $200,000.
You're just not going to stop this sort of thing happening. The paparazzi know. London isn't the market, Paris isn't the market, the world is the market.
The underpass by the Seine has become an instant landmark in a city of history and beauty. Amid the flowers and sorrow, there's also disgust that this unnecessary tragedy happened here in Paris. They'll remember this place as the site of 2 separate tragedies, that of a princess dead at 36, and the personal tragedy of a woman rebuilding her life who just wanted to be left alone. Just who is to blame for the death of the princess might be answered by the survivor Trevor Rees-Jones, Dodi's bodyguard. He's still in hospital with head wounds, but will soon talk to police. It's ironic that Diana's last interview was to the French newspaper Le Monde just last week. She said she liked France. Here she felt safe. In Paris, Tim Stott, 7 Nightly News.
As we've seen, Diana's death has prompted a quick response from celebrities. Actors like Nicole Kidman, who says she's constantly hounded and harassed by the paparazzi, even at home in Australia. The harsh criticism comes as leaders and people around the world continue to pay tribute to the princess.
Across the world, there have been both tears and tributes. On footpaths around Los Angeles, they have turned street corners into shrines. Others have simply written their message on the pavement. Of all the cities in the world, Hollywood knows the worst of the paparazzi.
The press, by and large, are fantastic. We're talking about a small renegade group. They're stalkers. They're legalized stalkers.
And Australia's Nicole Kidman has been among those hunted by the packs of photographers.
It makes you very upset. It makes you scared. Obviously, Princess Diana had it a lot worse than anybody else in the world. And for it to result in something like this is just awful.
It's a tragedy which has touched all of America. At the US Open, a moment's silence. Regardless of who's to blame, there is the sad realization that a woman who was emerging as a crusader for so many causes is now gone. And today, that was the focus of tributes from world leaders.
We liked her very much. We admired her work for children, for people with AIDS.
And from one humanitarian to another,
that she had great love for the poor.
The woman who wanted to be the Queen of Hearts touched thousands in her short public life, but sadly, even more in her death. In the United States, John Vors, 7 Nightly News.
Our Parliament pauses to honour Diana. That's next on 7's Late News. Also, personal tributes to the Queen of Hearts from Australian admirers. And in other news, moves to protect Aussie jobs. Tomorrow, Prime Minister John Howard will join Governor-General Sir William Dean at a memorial service for Diana. Today, though, federal politicians put their differences aside, Parliament stopping to express the sense of loss felt across the nation.
This time, it was the silence of our politicians that said more than their words. Parliament suspended for an hour as a mark of respect for Princess Diana. Outside, the national flag signifying the same. Our leaders united in their grief and their memories of the princess's visits to Australia.
She was a person that did capture our imagination. It was not only her style and beauty, it was also her spontaneity, her friendliness, her warmth.
And for an emotional Kim Beazley, her commitment to causes like AIDS.
She was the people's princess.
and that is how she will stay.
Earlier, party leaders signed the condolence book at the British High Commission and Government House. And there were messages from ordinary people as well. One entry here at the British High Commission reads, "Peace and happiness to Diana at last." In Canberra, Glenn Milne, 7 Nightly News.
While our leaders paid their respects, thousands of other Australians, as Glenn just said, also paused to honour Diana. Prayers were offered around the country.
The compassion of a mother and the charm and grace of a princess. Diana discarded protocol to share her warmth with everyday people, capturing the affection of a nation.
She made herself available to the ordinary public all the time.
And the extraordinary people she inspired to overcome adversity.
She was very cheery when I was talking to her. Very down-to-earth person, I think. Just a regular, natural person that anybody can talk to.
And those same people flocked to services across the nation today to pay their personal respects. Just hours after a special mass was announced, at least 500 people gathered at St Mary's Cathedral in Sydney.
Certainly means that this woman's life has touched ours in all sorts of ways.
In Adelaide, flowers have been arriving at Government House all day, flags at half-mast, as the city remembered the princess who helped others overcome their own personal tragedy. Phil Williams recalling vividly her compassion for him and other victims of the Ash Wednesday fires during her 1983 Adelaide visit.
She was quite incredible with her empathy, and it just seemed to flow through from her to me, and I mean, I'd like to think from me to her too, I suppose. You can't put a value on someone like her.
The British consulate in Brisbane has become the city's focus for emotional tributes.
Many of these callers have even broken down into tears. It's been quite emotional.
Well, I loved her very much.
In Perth, flowers on the footpath marked Western Australia's sorrow.
She has become a kind of goddess, really, and I think that explains in part this extraordinary sense of sort of emptiness.
Tim Verstegen, 7 Nightly News.
Turning to other news now, and the number of tourists in Australia on working holiday visas will be cut back after an inquiry found foreign workers are stealing jobs from young Australians. But the tourism industry is furious, claiming the visitors take jobs Australians are unwilling to do.
The tourism industry employs 1 in 9 Australians. Now an inquiry claims tourists on working holiday visas are stealing those jobs.
There are young Australians out there who have considerable skills in languages, and they were finding that they were being shut out.
The parliamentary reports also found too many foreign workers are taking harvest labour.
We find it unacceptable that the horticultural industry is relying so heavily on working holiday makers.
With unemployment at 8.7%, the reports recommended a limit on the number of foreign workers allowed in Australia over the next 3 years. But with reports the country's race debate is damaging tourism, any suggestion foreign workers might harm the local job market has received an angry response.
It's a great furphy to say they're taking away the jobs of young Australians. It is simply an extension of the xenophobia operating in Canberra right now. Most of the times there's nobody else applying for the jobs.
And tourism leaders say overseas visitors spend up to $4,000 each when in Australia. In Canberra, Elise Mooney, 7 Nightly News.
The 7 Network has won the opportunity to make the final bid in the battle for exclusive AFL television rights into the next century. According to the AFL, 7 won the contest with a $20 million package.
Brushing up on their football skills, 7 Chairman Kerry Stokes and AFL Chief Wayne Jackson announced the 7 Network has secured the first and last refusal rights for the AFL TV coverage after the year 2001, effectively giving 7 TV's hottest sporting property well into the next century. Kerry Stokes was clearly delighted to have kicked a goal in one of the toughest bidding wars in recent years.
So it's been a very good partnership, and one which we're extremely pleased will now continue for a very long period of time.
Channel 7's bid, from our viewpoint, was clearly superior to that of Channel 9.
And in a day of victories, the 7 Networks consortium bid also won the right to build Melbourne's new Docklands Stadium. The 52,000-seat covered stadium on the fringe of the city will create a new centre for the AFL and help kick off the Sydney Olympics.
It's exciting. It's great to be back here doing that, and it's great to be making what I think is a real contribution.
Channel 7's Melbourne studio will also be relocated onto the Docklands site to become the most technologically advanced, fully digital TV station in Australia. Dean Allen Craig, 7 Nightly News.
And another blow today for Channel 9 proprietor Kerry Packer. The federal government has decided to postpone a decision on changes to cross-media ownership laws until after the next election. The current laws prevent media owners from dominating television stations and newspapers in the same city. A spokesman for Communications Minister Richard Alston says the government will focus on higher priorities like jobs, tax reform and native title. The Australian share market today saw one of its quietest days trading in almost a year. The All Ords was off 2 points on Friday. The Dow closed down 72. Concern about plunging Asian markets drained Coca-Cola Amatil, which shed 32 cents. QBE fell 8 and BHP 4. Among the banks, the Commonwealth lost 19 cents, the ANZ 3 and National Australia 1. The Aussie dollar is at 73.12 US, 88.38 against the yen, 45.35 pence. The US dollar around 1.8 Deutschmarks. Gold is at $324.75. The FT100 up 35. The Nikkei plunged again, and another big slump for the Hang Seng, free falling 710 points. The weather's ahead on 7's late news, but next, the AFL Tribunal robs the Western Bulldogs of a key player. And a heart-stopper in Super League's elimination semi-final. In AFL, the Western Bulldogs are furious at the suspension of defender Danny Southern, who'll miss Saturday's crucial first final against Sydney. In a night of high drama at the Tribunal, Southern became the first player to be rubbed out on a wrestling charge.
Danny Southern was almost uncontrollable as it became clear that after being fined a total of $16,000 for 2 previous wrestling-related charges, a third case would lead to a suspension. The Bulldog backman outed for his part in this 4-man melee. The Tribunal disagreed with Southern's defence that he was only trying to restrain 2 opponents from wrestling teammate Scott West. Southern was seething as he left with a 1-match penalty, forcing him out of Saturday's qualifying final against Sydney. It's the 3rd time the Western Bulldogs have felt hard done by at the Tribunal this year. Previously contemplating legal action, they're again likely to consider an appeal. The club's anger was exacerbated with on-baller Paul DiMartina rubbed out for the first 2 weeks of the finals on a striking charge laid without video evidence. Scott West became the 19th Bulldog to appear before the Tribunal, fined on 3 separate wrestling charges. The Westerners' scorecard now includes 6 fines and 18 weeks' worth of suspensions. Meantime, Hawthorn's Raiden Tallis was outed for 1 match after the punch of the season collected 2 opponents. Mark Doran, 7 Nightly News.
Penrith has set up a semi-final showdown with Canberra next Monday night after knocking Canterbury out of the Super League final series. The Panthers won the elimination bout 15-14, courtesy of a Ryan Girdler field goal.
With so much at stake, the opposing forwards tried to outmuscle each other. Matt Adamson was placed on report after this incident in the early minutes. Canterbury took the advantage, though, where it mattered most. The response just 4 minutes later couldn't have been better. Penrith scored a try that defied the wet conditions. With another try and this dropped goal, which eventually proved crucial, the Panthers had a 7-point buffer at half-time. But that advantage was lost early in the second half. The Panthers still led, but only by 1. As it turned out, that was the only try in the second half. While Penrith didn't score a point in the final 40 minutes, their defence was outstanding. Final score, Panthers 15, Bulldogs 14. Mark Arthurson, 7 Nightly News.
It's full steam ahead for Pat Rafter at the US Open Tennis into the last 16, and he still hasn't dropped a set. In fact, he lost only 4 games in dispatching Frenchman Lionel Roux. Rafter now tackles Andre Agassi, the man who dumped his Davis Cup compatriot Mark Woodford. Taking a look at the weather for Tuesday on the satellite map, broad cloud covers much of southeastern Australia and a narrow band with isolated storms extends back towards the centre. Low pressure over South Australia is generating widespread light rain across New South Wales. In Queensland, though, it should be fine tomorrow, apart from a few showers in the south. Mackay, 26 degrees, Rockhampton, 27, Bundaberg, 23, a few showers in Brisbane, 20 there, 20 in Tamworth too, and some rain. Newcastle, 23, Sydney, 24 degrees, in Albury-Wodonga, 17, a little rain, Melbourne, 16. Down in Hobart, a bit of rain tomorrow and 12 degrees. Sale, expecting 16, Mount Gambier, 12. A little sunshine in Adelaide, perhaps some clouds though, 15 degrees, Whyalla, 17. Over in the west, Perth, perhaps a few showers, 16 degrees. The same for Kalgoorlie and 18. A sunny day forecast in Broome with a top of 29 degrees. In the Alice, another sunny day, a top of 26 there. And up in Darwin, 30 degrees, the forecast, and plenty of sunshine. Before we go, a look back at our major story. A funeral service will be held at Westminster Abbey for Princess Diana on Saturday night at 8 o'clock Australian Eastern Time. Buckingham Palace made the announcement tonight. Diana's body was flown back to England earlier today, accompanied by Prince Charles and her two sisters. Her coffin has been taken to the Chapel Royal at St James's Palace. After the funeral service, Diana will be buried at her family's estate in the English Midlands. Channel 7 will have live coverage of the funeral on Saturday night. And that's all from the 7 newsroom for now. Sunrise is our next major bulletin at 6 in the morning. I'm Chris Barth. Good night.